Hi, I'm Jason Gorber for ThatShelf.com, and we're here to look at Joni Mitchell in surround sound.
Mitchel.
So fans of this channel know I'm mildly obsessed with Joni Mitchell. It's been a year since I went to the Gorge music event. It was extraordinary, once-in-a-lifetime experience being with 27,000 people outdoors, just sending love to Joni. The archive of her work has been going on for now many years. We have many videos on this channel documenting some of them, but the one that I was really hoping before things got a little bit crazy into her catalog was that they were going to go back and actually do official re-releases of the quadraphonic mixes. Now, that's what we get here. Spoiler, we're getting the original quad mixes for 3 of the records, a new quad mix, and also Atmos mix. Now keep watching, I'll explain it all. So, quadrophonic, early 70s to the mid 70s, I guess it was, there was a push for an expanded. We had seen this massive shift between mono and stereo, and then a bunch of recording artists started exploring different ways of using different speaker locations to create a much more immersive sound. This eventually would evolve and consolidate into what we think of as modern surround sound, starting with 5.1, so 3 channels in the front, 2 in the back. Originally those were in mono, and then they became stereo, discrete 5.1, then 7.1, and now Atmos, which is an object-based surround whereby each speaker can be individually delineated by actually having, if mixed this way, having, instead of saying I'm going from this speaker to this speaker, I say I want this sound field to go from the back to the front. And however many speakers you have in your system, it essentially calculates. And so it allows you to go from stereo to 64.4, whatever you want. I think it's 4 dedicated LFE channels. You can do 64 up to hundreds of actual individual units, but I think primarily it basically works as a maximum of 64 discrete in most industrial things. At home, the most you're going to get is nowhere near that. Doesn't matter. The point is that Atmos is crazy, ceiling speakers, all that stuff. But the original quad, as per the name, 4 channels. So what you're missing in the 5.1, you're missing a center channel. So it's a phantom center channel in the front. So between the left and the right, if you mix in mono, you're going to get center. And the same in the rear. You have rear left, or my left, rear right, whichever way you want to look at it, and then if you mix equal this way, you're going to get a center. But if you think about it in 4 space, and we're going to do it this way, if this is the front and this is the back, you can mix this way as well. So you can get phantom center between the speakers in front, between the speakers in back, between the speakers on the left, or between the speakers on the right, which means if you mix something equal to all, it'll sound like it's coming right over your head. So almost like, not even a voice of God, that's what they call it when they have a speaker right top, but it basically feels like it's sort of inside your head because you have 4 speakers coming to you. Now, the huge disadvantage of quad, and there are many. One, you need identical, ideally, speakers with identical placement. Anybody who's seen a 5.1 sort of layout knows that most people primarily focus on your front speakers, and front left and right, and then have hopefully a center speaker, and then surrounds either on the side or on the back or some sort of area forming a little bit of a circle. Quad, you want basically, I'm just going to use my stop making sense box here. So if this is the front of, we'll put this the right way. If this is the front, if you think about that, this is where your TV would be on this way, right? Or this is where the front of the room will be, because again, you would have a speaker here and here and a center speaker, and the surround could be here or here. It could be sort of on the corner. It could be sort of behind here, like sort of facing this way. I'm making a mess of this, but you get the idea. With quad, rectangle, or even square, let's do it with a square, you want a speaker here, 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 and here. And you want to sit dead center. You want these speakers to be the same amplification, the same quality, the same sound, so that when things are mixed for phantom center, this way you're going to get it, but also for phantom depth. And that is the key to reproducing quad. Even worse than that, there were competing quadraphonic formats, not just in terms of like 8-track had quad, vinyl had quad, reel-to-reel had quad, and of course there's multiple speeds of reel-to-reel, but there was 3 that I can think of, SQ, SR, not SR, SQ, CD4, and QS were the 3 that come to mind. Forgive me, it's so hard to actually keep track of. It's bad enough I can keep track of SACD and DVD audio. Anyway, the point is this, that back then you needed different boxes often. Your amplifier would decode one kind but not another. And then your stylus on your record player, if you're actually doing a CD4, had to be good enough to get the carrier wave. So you would be getting the difference between phase or matrixed, essentially, surround, where it would actually use phase differentiation to actually extract a surround sound from a stereo phase, or actually discrete carrier wave stuff, I think it was at 50K or something like that, and actually do proper discrete. A huge pain, but what you would get were unique surround mixes. There was this period of time where people were actually doing, honest to God, 4-channel mixes. And some of them were never released, or some of them were only released in these incredibly esoteric formats. We've talked before about Pink Floyd. I mean, there's very famously, Alan Parsons did a quadraphonic mix, an original mix, which was never released. People managed to actually get it, and through the various forums and stuff like that, some incredible humans who had nothing better to do other than to please people like me would release essentially homebrew DTS versions, or even DVD audio burnable versions of original quad mixes. Now, yes, these are essentially bootlegs, and it's obviously gray area when it comes to whether or not there's original, if the original versions are absolutely not able to be released, then that's certainly a way that I actually had a chance to listen to many of these quadraphonic files, quadraphonic productions. Which brings us, of course, to Joni Mitchell. So Joni Mitchell, for several of her records, they mixed properly 4-channel quadraphonic albums that have just sat for 50 years, essentially, unheard. And even if they have been heard, the amount of equipment, the sound you're going to get from it is just not ideal. The best way to do it is to obviously play it off the original multi-track tapes, but an even more convenient way is to get it on a digital disc that will play on most home theater or other surround setups. And that's what you get here. Yes, you are getting Atmos mixes, and we're going to get to the details about that mix in a second, but you are getting, for 3 of these records, proper vintage quadraphonic under the Quadio thing that Rhino has been doing. They have done this for the Chicago records. I have the Doobie Brothers box set. There's a bunch of others that have been released, and I could not be happier. I have dreamed of this being official releases. You were getting tastes of this during the high resolution audio war. Is that some of the so-called 5.1 mixes that you would actually find on Super Audio CDs in particular, some of the Sony stuff, were original quad mixes. In terms of the Warner stuff, the Reprise stuff, on Neil Young's Harvest, it is a 5.1 mix, but very much based on an unreleased quadraphonic mix. It was actually recorded at Quadraphonic Studios in Nashville. And that was the first time that I really heard a surround sound version of Harvest, where I realized I was going to have to do work. And the work was going to involve not just changing the way that I set up my room, but how I could actually do signals and make sure that the right signals are going to the right speakers. Because again, remember, I know I'm being silly and over complicating things, but work with me. Anybody who's still watching, God bless. 5.1 with the 2 speakers, side speakers. 7.1, you have 2 speakers on the side, 2 speakers on the back. Now, for quadraphonic, what do we say? We want the speakers on the back, but this is channel 6 and channel 7. So if you have a regular 5.1 setup and you listen to a quadraphonic, you're going to get stuff in left channel, right channel, side surround left, and side surround right, which is not what I want. What I want is left, right, rear left, rear right. And so what I did is I actually had somebody build an XLR switch box that takes the signal that normally goes to the side and flips it. And so you have 4 inputs, 4 outputs, and it does this. And so left side, left rear, right rear, and then the output actually reverses this so that the input from the side goes to the rear. And that means I recreate that quad box just with a flip of 2 switches. Crazy. I don't know anyone else in the world that has gone to this in terms of doing quad. Yes, you can do it on a patch bay in a professional music studio, but what can I say? At home, this is something that I decided to do because I love properly mixed quadraphonic so much. My rear speakers are vastly better than my side surround, which is completely overkill when it comes to listening to movies. I have basically flat speakers on the side, not like micro flat, but basically surround style old B&W speakers. But the speakers behind me is that speaker right there, B&W 805. Those could easily be my main speakers. I spent way more on those than I did on my side surround speakers for music listening, so that when I listen to 5.1 mixes where I want the music to actually fully surround me, instead of just being the half of the room front, I want it to be the back of the room to the front of the room, and to create that excellent acoustic space. So what do you get when you actually go through this? Well, when you're listening to something like Neil Young's Harvest, again, you get so much of the open space, you get so much of the mix, but when he's singing, instead of it sounding all muddy like it does when it's side surround, if it's rear surround, you get that sense that he's singing here and all the instruments. It's like you were right beside him while he's singing and all the instruments truly envelop you. In other words, through quadraphonic, you sometimes get a way more immersive soundscape than an Atmos mix, which often is mixed to be very front heavy with ambience and particular elements up on the ceiling speakers, not dissimilar to a movie mix. An Atmos mix, of course, for film is that the majority of the stuff is going where the screen is, so that's where your attention is. There are some artists, people like Flaming Lips, for example, that completely go nuts and actually have like drums going in 360. But primarily for those sort of ambitious mixes, in a quadraphonic setup, you're going to get a much more immersive. Now, like 3D, simply going overboard doesn't do anything if it's not, tasteful. I mean, you can do really obnoxious stuff in 3D, or you can do incredible stuff with 3D. Again, spatialization very much has to do with the taste of the people who are actually doing it. So yes, you can be obnoxious like people like Flaming Lips. Of course, Frank Zappa has a Quadio DVD audio that does really hilarious things. There's a Vinnie Colaiuta drum solo where it's literally mixed like you are in the middle of the drums as they're spinning around you. All of that stuff. Joni Mitchell, primarily thought of as a sort of acoustic folky woman during this period, was when she really started to work with bands and start with symphonic sounds and all that element. So if there's one sort of element of her sound that was being expanded during this period, this is the sort of era, the Asylum era. The 1972 to 75 stuff is really where the surround stuff really comes to its fore, and where her music actually allows for this kind of opening up. Now, what do you get inside the box? Let's sort of go back to the basics. Well, you get a box, and you get advertisement to actually remind people to actually go to her website and look at all the excellent stuff that they're doing with the archives. And as I said, she's been super tight with Neil Young for a while. It's actually Neil Young sort of archive methodology is what she's really following. Neil Young being like Dylan, but Neil Young specifically has done an extraordinary job of mining his vault. It's been really remarkable. And speaking of Neil, we actually have here a painting, a reproduction of a painting that Joni did of Neil, and a spiel of him talking about how much Joni's music and her time at Asylum Records are a major contribution to our world of music. Yes, Neil, absolutely. And he talks very much about how she went on to work with musicians significantly better than him. I'm not sure that's arguable. He's an extraordinary talent, but I mean, the people that Joni was working with during this period are mind-boggling. Like the Miles Davises of this world, like the Zappas, the Stings, the Paul Simons, this is a woman who at the very beginning knew that by surrounding herself by incredible musicians, often jazz musicians, she would elevate not only her music but just the sound that she was making. In this case the stuff that she's doing with Tom Scott and all of that stuff is just unbelievable. And of course, the next phase is where we get the Jocko Band, the Michael Brecker stuff, the Don Elias, all of that stuff. Ridiculous. Pat Metheny, how am I even forgetting? Insane. But this version of her really is that transition from these sort of straight up sort of quote unquote singer-songwriter stuff into the much more dynamic instrumentation. But she still never lost the incredible clarity of not only her voice, but her songwriting. Absolutely extraordinary. So 4 records included in the set. We have For the Roses, and I'll get to that in a second. We have Court and Spark, one of my favorite records of all time by far. We have here Hissing of Summer Lawns. And we have Mouths of Owls, a live record from the era. Now, each of them comes in this sort of beautiful sort of reproduction of the vinyl, including the way that the gatefold works, including even on this one, how the record itself on the original is actually tucked in between this. Just stunning. Court and Spark, it's actually beveled, or embossed rather, the way that the original is, the sort of textured paper, the inside with the lyric elements, and the disc itself. All the discs are Blu-ray, compatible with just about any Blu-ray player. Hissing of Summer Lawns, again, the embossment on the bottom, absolutely stunning. And then Mouths of Owls, again, another gatefold. The double gatefold with all the elements, including the band photo. Great. 3 of them had original quad mixes. So these guys. So these had vintage 1970s quad mixes, and they are included in this. For the Roses has a brand new quad mix done for this set. All of them also include a brand new Atmos mix. And again, the Atmos is going back to the master tapes and actually, from what I understand, getting the stems anyway, and actually doing a full new immersive sound. Let's deal with the Atmos first, because I think many more people will actually have a chance to actually listen to the Atmos. The difference between stereo and Atmos is significant, and the Atmos is very, very broad and bombastic, especially even on songs like For the Roses, which is a much more intimate record. But I wanted to look again, because Court and Spark is the most obvious one to actually look at. The way that this mix actually sort of behaves is very revealing. So as you can see, the disc itself, as I pull it out, right? It all goes here. Like Court and Spark helped me in Free Man in Paris. The first 3 songs in this, bonkers. I've said before, maybe the best 3 songs ever on a record. But I was looking actually at Down to You, which I think is a really interesting test. Because Down to You starts with her on piano, and it's just basically just her in the room with a little bit of ambience and stuff like that. And when all the other instrumentation comes in, there's something I love. I love bolero-like things. I love things that build. Just a sucker for such things. And that's really where you get a really revealing difference between the modern Atmos mix and the vintage quadraphonic. The Atmos mix, immediately the instruments come in, the bass is there because the subwoofer is kicking in. Suddenly you have a dedicated LFE channel. And my subwoofer is tuned for home theater, so it's a little bit sort of more active than I'd probably want it to be. If I was listening to Atmos more on this, I might dial it back a couple decibels. You have the sound coming really nicely tamed between the ceiling speakers and the sort of main surround. You have speakers coming beside you, behind you, 3 in front, 4 above, because I have a 7.1.4 system, and it really feels immersive, and it's great. The clarity of her voice is interesting because it's coming so absolutely from the center channel. You can basically hear the timbre of the microphones. It is isolated in a way that is both revealing and not necessarily as engaging as I might want it to be. But what you're getting is absolutely the style, the color of that individual recording that you actually had from back in the day. It is amazing to hear, and you can really hear track to track as different conditions in recording studios. You're hearing these details in a way that on a stereo mix you simply cannot pull out nearly as accurately. I have the ability to actually turn off, for example, my left and right, and only hear the surround mix, or only hear the center channel and stuff like that. And so I can pick out individual elements. For those that really enjoy those people, and this is totally sidebar, but those that really love picking apart tracks online, where you say, oh, here's the vocal part of Freddie Mercury singing. A lot of that's actually from Rock Band, when they actually got the stems of somebody hacked Rock Band. But a way to do it sort of with the music you have is to be able to isolate individual elements from a surround mix and actually hear how it is done. Hear the different instrumentation, hear all those elements. So the Atmos mix is good, and if all we had was the Atmos mix, it would be fine. I would probably never listen to the Atmos mix over listening to the stereo mix, which brings us to the quad mix. Now, the quad mix on this, again, is relatively tame. It really feels like the same modern methodologies used. Yeah, it's a little bit active, certainly clean. There's no tapis, there's none of that stuff. You can tell that it's done in a way very commensurate with the Atmos, with much better sort of source materials in terms of signal to noise ratio and stuff like that. But from the original quad mix, which would have been multi-generation, so a lot of tapes and stuff like that, this sounds bonkers. I've had a compressed DTS version ripped off of, I guess, reel-to-reel probably. I also have the 8-track version. This in surround, quadraphonic, on a proper quad sound setup, sounds unbelievably good. When those songs kick in at the beginning, it is subtle, it is much more sort of like a contemporary mix, much more front forward when it needs to be, but there's much more sort of sucked into the back in a good way, so that it feels much more enveloping than a traditional stereo mix. But when it has elements to play with, as this album goes on and the other instruments come in and the things kick in and the drums are there and the swells, the other synthesizer, the backup singers, all of those elements, the symphony coming in, the sound of the French horns, it is unbelievably great. And I, for the first time in my lifetime, have been able to hear this in the way it was originally mixed. I can't imagine it sounded this good at home ever. Period. Maybe the people who had a proper quad setup at a music studio who had the tape, the 4 people that probably ever heard quad, I don't even know that Joni's heard it in a proper way, sat down and actually listened to it in ways. We don't know any of this stuff. But now at home, because of them finally releasing it, we get to actually experience quadraphonic in the way originally mixed. It's like finding a negative of a lost movie. It's like finally being able to see something that otherwise you wouldn't have been able to see. You are for sure hearing something in a way, in a quality that has not been able to be heard, forget in 50 years, ever. It's truly archaeological in its capabilities, and I could not be happier. Lossless, 4-channel, quadraphonic on a format which is is not Super Audio CD or not DVD audio. I don't have to go crazy worrying about keeping spare players or whatever. Blu-ray is a format which is very well established, and as long as we have devices that will actually play back PCM, we will be able to do that. It is just stunning. And so I could not be happier. The packaging is extraordinary. The ability to actually have this as part of the collection, just mind-blowing. Now, I have 7, 8 versions of some of these records. When am I going to choose to listen to digital versus listen to 2-channel? Well, essentially, that sort of alludes to the question that the question sort of implies something. If I'm listening to 2-channel, I'm listening to vinyl. It's just that's what I'm doing these days. It's just what it is. I'm highly unlikely to listen to the digital version of this and that. Now, I do have the HD tracks files. So on my portable player, that's what I'll listen to with my headphones. But when I'm here and I'm in the mood, I am absolutely going to throw on the surround mixes, the quad mixes, and actually dive into that way. And just to hear in the most immersive way. What I talked about with the Atmos is that you could hear the individual microphones. There's definitely more, for lack of a better word, there's greater separation because you have more speakers to work with. But there's also, it's less harmonious. It's less sort of integrated. And to get the proper quad in the proper setup in a proper room that's tuned for such things, it's not perfect. I don't have identical speakers. I don't have identical placement. Obviously, the stuff that's coming from behind you is in different phase relationship stuff coming from the front. I got some room. It's not perfect, but it's pretty goddamn good. And the fact of the matter is that releases like this, that as I said, I could only dream about finally coming to fruition, I am ecstatic. Now, there is a bunch of stuff still on my dream list. We did get, I mean, it was really nice. We got the Gordon Lightfoot not that long ago. Again, I was super happy about the Chicago set. I have other surround mixes like the 5.0 mix of Kind of Blue, the original Super Audio CD. Absolutely stunning. Those are obviously remixed from the original 3-channel tape. Paul Simon I would love to see the Paul Simon stuff get treated in the same way as this. Hello, Warner. I want to see, as Columbia Warner, it gets very complicated who's got what, but I desperately want to see the Paul Simon stuff from that era released in quadraphonic if possible. For now, I'm absolutely ecstatic that that Rhino Records is doing what, back in the day, Rhino was always that label that just released stuff that I didn't even think was possible. I didn't even think that we would ever get it, and then it was released. Again, if we're giving shouts out to Rhino, God bless, I want to see the Aretha Franklin completed Fillmore. It was released on a CD set. I want to see it, warts and all, mastered on vinyl. I know it's crazy, but it's such an extraordinary 3 performance set. Let's see that actually released. They're coming out with more and more surround or titles. Very, very, very well done. The packaging is great. The menus are okay. The navigation is fine. It starts playing as soon as you put it in, which is great for people that don't actually have a screen set up. But it's a little bit of a schlep to change which audio track is actually going. You kind of have to go down to the bottom and actually change the audio track, and then the track starts again. It's harder then to sort of go back and forth on the menu between the Atmos, the quad, and the stereo. That's something many of us like to do. But yeah, it's you, when you see the menu, you actually have some of the watercolors sort of coming in and out of the original Joni presentation. So there's certainly there. But you don't buy this because you care about the menu. You buy it for the sound. And my God, I'm so happy about this presentation. So there's our look. There's our gush, frankly, about Joni Mitchell's Asylum albums on quadraphonic. My understanding is that the albums like Mingus were done in quadraphonic as well. Be interesting to see if those get an individual release or otherwise. I don't think Court and Spark was ever released in anything other than the original stereo. I don't necessarily need a new surround mix for that. I would much rather have an actual 4K, except it's shot on video, so it's going to look terrible anyway. But at the very least, like a really nice Blu-ray version of it with the original aspect ratio would be amazing. Again, to that point, so many films don't do this. By including the original and the new surround and the original stereo, you are getting what's truly an archive. And when they talk about this, the Joni Mitchell archive stuff, this is archival. This is worthy of archive because we're not deleting the past by replacing it with a new mix. Lord knows that Atmos is like a big thing now. You got people with sort of fake Atmos headphones. You got people on Apple TV listening to it on or whatever, in completely compressed versions to give a sort of sense of surround. For me, it's that all of that is pretty much useless. But nonetheless, the mix is done, so presented in as good a quality as possible. I'm ecstatic. And if all this was an Atmos mix of these records, I would still probably get it. But the fact that they have gone the extra mile and included the original quadraphonic mixes, I am ecstatic. For thatshelf.com, I'm Jason Gorber. Thank you so much for watching. Please, let's give some love and support to Joni Mitchell. Let us thank those that were actually behind this release. We will see you next video. All the best. Take care.
Shelf.